So again, it's just promoting further imbalances. So don't do that. Honestly, it sounds cool. It may be really hard and funky. You're just going to promote some further imbalances. That's not going to be nice. Well, I've returned after my hiatus last week. Well, I say have returned as if you haven't already seen the video that came out on Monday with Austin, but that's not the point. I've returned because I'm back from my travels, and we're back into it with an educational video where we're going to talk about some lat training and some common mistakes you're probably making, also things you can do to rectify those mistakes, in addition to telling you what's worth doing and what's not. MDJ Fitness is going to tell us about building the illusion of a tiny waist with these 5 exercises, indicating these are her top 5 lat movements. Before we do so, a couple of things. TFNL clothing is always linked down below in the description. In addition to that, if at any point throughout this entire video you actually just like the video, I would appreciate it if you did do just that and like the video, and maybe even subscribe to the channel, as it would mean a lot to me.
Stick around for my top 5 favorite exercises. Let's go. All right, guys, exercise number 1 is gonna be pull-ups.
So firstly, the whole idea of like building the illusion of a smaller waist comes from the fact that if you get bigger lats, you create more of that V taper on your back, which then in turn, by default, will make your waist look a bit smaller comparatively. So the pull-up itself is a banging movement. Honestly, like a wide grip pull-up where you're getting high levels of adduction, where you're essentially bringing the elbow closer to the body like so, will be really effective for building your lats. At the end of the day, what you have to look at, one of the primary functions of the lats is going to be adducting the upper arm to the body. So again, doing this where you are pulling that elbow down and into the kind of pelvis is going to help with that.
One of my favorite lat building exercises is going to be lat pull downs. Lat pull downs are goated. Okay, I know all of us like lat pull downs. Who doesn't like lat pull downs?
To be fair, lat pull downs are a really fair alternative to pull ups. A lot of people can't necessarily do pull ups due to the difficulty of the movement, which is very understandable. They are a bloody hard movement to do. So doing a lat pull down where you can adopt a similar wide grip is going to be very useful there. Don't get me wrong, you can do other grips when looking at like pull ups and pull downs. You're essentially altering the plane of motion in which you're training through. So for example, if you're pulling out here, like a wide grip lat pull down or pull up, you're looking at more frontal plane movement. If you're looking at over here, like a narrow grip pull up or a chin up, some might call it, or a pull down, you are looking at like more sagittal plane. Both target the lats just a bit differently. And again, the same rules apply here, where you are really trying to get that elbow as close to the body as possible. So you're really tuck it down and look at that high levels of adduction. And that adduction primarily occurs after you break the 90-degree point. Because once you get past 90 degrees, the elbows start actually traveling closer to the body, which is exactly what you want when looking at working the lats. The big thing here is going to be getting that bar as close to the chest as possible. Do you have to touch the chest? Not necessarily. It's very much dependent on the person, their range of motion, their flexibility, mobility, things like that. But getting as close as possible is definitely going to be a big thing.
Third favorite lat building exercise, lat push down. So instead of a lat pull down, we're gonna do a pushing motion.
Is it a lat push down, or is it technically like a cable lat pullover? So many different names, but regardless, the movement still applies. A fair movement, and we're going to talk about it in just a moment.
You can either do it with a straight bar or the handy dandy rope.
When doing this movement, I would definitely opt to do it with the rope. Realistically, when, as I mentioned, looking at like working the lats, we want to get the elbow as close to the body as possible. When you do an overhand grip, if I roll my sleeve up slightly, if you do an overhand grip like so, the elbow turns out slightly and you're kind of somewhat a bit far away from the body. If you go neutral through the rope, you can get that elbow and upper arm closer to the body, which then in turn may result in the movement being a bit more effective for the lats, because you're essentially getting greater lat recruitment. So again, think elbow close to the body, neutral grip is going to help with that on this movement. But as a whole, the movement itself is fine. Like she made a point earlier about not going beyond the body. I back that. Your lats reach their peak shortened position when the upper arm is in line with the body. If you go beyond that, you're not working the lats anymore, so it's kind of pointless. Very quickly, link down below, you've got a few things. You've got the link to work with myself on a one-to-one coaching basis, where I can help coach you towards your goals, whatever they may be and wherever you may be in the world. You've also got the link to the TFNL group coaching, which for less than $1 a day, you can follow a program written by me and talk to me and the other team members in the community message board, which is bloody fantastic, and that's for at home and at the gym. You've also got the TFNL clothing, which is linked below, and you've also got the TFNL workout guides, which are bloody fantastic workout guides that not only tell you what to do with a workout program included, but also show you how to do it with demonstration form videos, and also tell you why you're doing it with plenty of information and education throughout. So if you fancy any of those, they're always linked down below in the description.
Is gonna be plate loaded high rows. So we're gonna superset it and do 10 single per side right into 8 to 10 double.
I don't back that. Firstly, the plate loaded high row is absolutely fine. It very much mimics somewhat like iliac pull down, where you're looking at that kind of single arm neutral grip pull down. But the issue with the high row is, you'll see shortly, it puts you into a supinated position, which in turn means that you're going to get a lot more bicep recruitment and activation, which then in turn means your biceps may become a limiting factor rather than the lats. The second thing I want to address there is what she said about supersetting. If you go from left side to right side to both sides, firstly, the second side when doing the unilateral work, so let's say you start with left, the right side is going to be at a disadvantage because it's going to have some carryover fatigue from the first side being the left. Secondly, when you then go from, let's say, just finishing your right side, and let's say you've hit failure, your left side has had a bit of time to recover. So if you get straight into bilateral, so both arms at the same time, but your right arm's hit failure, in theory, if you train hard enough, your right arm shouldn't be able to do any reps, but your left arm might be able to do a couple. So again, it's just promoting further imbalances. So don't do that. Honestly, it sounds cool. It may be really hard and funky. If you can do it well and actually get a good number of reps, you're not training hard enough, which means your unilateral work was probably redundant. Secondly, if you aren't doing it hard enough, you're probably not going to get any reps, or you're just going to promote some further imbalances. That's not going to be nice. So with this, when doing any kind of like unilateral, like single arm pull down variation, I do kind of lean into the working side slightly. One of the kind of assistance function of the lats is going to be like lateral flexion of the spine, so leaning slightly to the side. So think about leaning slightly into working side, elbow down to the hip. But the movement itself is fine.
Last exercise for my top 5 lat building exercises is going to be dumbbell single arm bent over rows.
Valid. Moving to the dumbbell row is fair. The issue that it can present with the dumbbell row is that it can kind of be a bit unstable at times, especially depending on how heavy you're going. But regardless, the movement itself is actually quite good. Whether you want to do it on the bench or leant over is actually completely up to you. She made the point here, which I'll point out now.
When you're leaning on a flat bench, which a lot of people do this way as well, you're targeting more of your mid upper back.
No, you're not. So essentially, what's going to essentially determine or greatly influence where you're targeting on the back is where your upper arm is. If your upper arm is still close to the body and you're still kind of tucking it along the side and not going beyond the body, you're still targeting the lats. It's not suddenly shifting loads of emphasis to the upper and mid back. Sure, if you were to go really beyond the body and encourage a lot of retraction, or maybe flare the arm more, it would shift that emphasis over, but you're not. So that's not actually true. A lot of people do use this movement as an excuse to cheat and just kind of throw the weight around. Arguably, one thing I want to point out is the fact that she's going beyond the body here actually presents the argument that maybe she's targeting more of the mid back here. But that's an argument for another day. Like I said, people often use this movement as an excuse to go really heavy and just kind of throw it around. Sure, going heavy is great, I respect it, but not at the sake of actually reducing the effectiveness of the movement, because now what are you really trying to train? You're trying to train your lats, or you're trying to train all the other muscles around that weren't necessarily target musculature that was intended to be trained. Don't use this excuse to throw weight around when you're not strong enough to lift it. In fairness, all of the movements she chose and selected were actually pretty valid, and I wouldn't really change many of them because, again, when it comes to lat training, it doesn't need to be that complicated. I really look for 2 primary things. I look for a wide grip vertical pulling motion where my arm is quite far away from the body and then tucking down, like a wide grip pull up or wide grip pull down, so frontal plane. I also look for a sagittal plane movement where my arm is in front of me, elbows coming down, so that might be an iliac pull down, a one-arm dumbbell row, a high row, whatever it may be. Once I've got those 2 movements nailed, so out and forward, I then look at different angles. I might go from high to low, I might go low to high, I might go mid to mid. It really comes down to playing around with what you feel is best. Provided you're working through those 2 planes of motions, you're probably fine. My most commonly programmed back movements will be like a wide grip pull up, maybe a wide grip pull down. You might consider an iliac pull down. You might consider a neutral grip like chest supported machine row, or I might even consider a one-arm dumbbell row. So a lot of the movements she's presenting are movements I would actually commonly program myself, which I respect and I appreciate. It's just key to make sure you're nailing the execution, which is why I kind of pointed out those few tips and tricks along the way. But again, just like all my videos, this is simply my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion in the comment section below. So tell me, what is your favorite lat movement and why? And also, is it actually a lat movement? Let's find out. But until the next one, thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my waffle about the old lats. And thank you for tolerating the video.